If there was one way I could describe Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa, it would be dreadful. I think that would be my word of choice. That fight, it wasn't just hard to watch. It was almost impossible to watch. My eyes, no matter how hard I tried to pay attention to the fight, my eyes just kept adverting to any other sensory input in the room because I was just, my dopamine receptors were dying for anything other than that, essentially. For me personally, the thing that was so disappointing was, I really felt like Paulo Costa, with the right game plan, had all the attributes he needed to beat Sean Strickland. And by no means was I rooting for Paulo Costa to win, but to me it just seemed very clear. Number one on Costa's priority list for this fight should have been just do not get backed up. You have to hold the center no matter what. You don't need to be necessarily marching Sean down, but just hold the center. And then fight behind your jab and try to land the head kicks. Costa has done a ton of cross-training in Taekwondo, and his high kicks are genuinely very, very, very good. He throws them super fast. He has a ton of dexterity. And as long as Strickland isn't marching you down, he is vulnerable to the head kick, right? The Philly shell is great for shoulder rolling punches, but you cannot shoulder roll a kick. But Strickland typically gets around this because he's so good at pressuring guys and putting them on the back foot. If you're on your bike constantly circling with Strickland right in your face, you're not going to be able to time a good head kick. But Abus Magomedov and Dricus Du Plessis, both of them found success with the high kicks just because they weren't getting backed up. So look, to me, the game plan was simple and I was excited to see Costa try to execute it. But it just wasn't it, man. That just I don't know. So clearly he was trying to set up the high kick because he started off with a ton of leg kicks, a lot of jabs to the body. Dean Thomas saw this himself and called it out during round 2.
The one thing that I noticed about Costa is his eye line, and this is what you did mention, John, is that his eye line was down low. Normally what that means is a head kick is coming. So do not be surprised if he keeps going low and then eventually you see a head kick.
But Costa barely threw any, never had any success with it because of that number one priority thing, that thing that should have been on the very, very tip top of his list, the number one absolute most important life or death aspect he needed to follow during this fight. He didn't really follow. He didn't really do it. He did not hold the center. He was allowing himself to get backed up. Anytime Strickland took a step forward, Costa was taking a step back. But of course, I want to make myself very clear here. I'm not attempting to say it's easy to not get pressured by Sean Strickland. Of course not. It's way easier said than done. But all he needed was a couple brief moments, maybe a jab to get Strickland to back up slightly with the head kick right behind it. But pretty much every single strike Paulo Costa threw, it was completely on its own. I don't think I saw more than a 2-shot combination. But honestly, I can't say I'm super surprised. The fact of the matter is Paulo Costa isn't the most skilled. I think we all know that. But to me, the most interesting aspect of this fight was the fact that one judge gave Paulo Costa 4 rounds, which, of course, that is absolutely ridiculous, but I think most people are of the mind that some of these judges, they just don't know what they're looking at, maybe they're kind of going senile. Maybe Dave Torelli was having some kind of onset schizophrenic episode during the fight. But I actually think there's a very clear reason why that scorecard came out the way it did, and I think this highlights an issue with Sean Strickland that is sort of a fundamental problem with his game in the sport of MMA. Now, the first thing we need to look at is the unified judging criteria. Now, I have probably brought this up and explained it in depth, I would say 13 to 14 times on this channel, but there is a lot of work to do still. People still do not know what the criteria is. The UFC commentators have no idea what the scoring criteria is. You turn on any UFC event, and it is painfully obvious that the people who are supposed to be commentating these fights for people who don't understand what's going on, they themselves don't understand what's going on. They do not, I don't think they've ever actually taken the time to I don't know. The UFC, they need to get stricter with these commentators. That is my number one gripe. Joe Rogan, I get it. He's a legend. He's amazing. He's been doing it for many, many years. Clearly, though, this UFC commentating job isn't that important to him. He's got a lot of other things going on because he doesn't know. Here it is. Here is the judging criteria. And the first thing I need you guys to understand, the biggest misconception out there right now is the number one criteria is damage. I mean, currently right now, all the UFC commentators are saying this. Finally, Daniel Cormier is saying it, even though it's a step in the right direction, but it's not true. Dominic Cruz says it. They all say it. They go, it's damage. Damage number one. Okay, first of all, damage isn't actually written anywhere here. The number one criteria is effective striking / grappling. That is number one. Those two things. But you need to pay attention to the wordage here because it is very specific. What the judges are supposed to be looking at are things that happen in the fight that have the immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute towards the end of the match, with the immediate weighing more heavily than cumulative. So, are you putting your opponent in danger? That is what they are judging. How close are your actions to potentially ending this fight? It's not that, damage is number one, who's doing more damage? It's not damage necessarily. It's who is putting their opponent in more danger. Who is getting closer to potentially ending the fight? A jab is scored as effective striking, right? But a huge overhand that rocks your opponent badly is way closer to potentially ending the fight than the jab is. So that's what you need to judge. Sure, Arman Tsarukyan did a good job being on top during round 3 of his fight with Charles. But clearly, as you see here, top and bottom fighters are not assessed on their position, but what they're doing, right? Charles' submission attempt was the closest thing that potentially could have ended that fight. So it scored way heavier than Arman just being on top. And this is where Sean's problems really get highlighted because his style is not built to put people in danger. It's just that simple. Sean's defense is super next level. I mean, it is ridiculously good. His jab, his front kick, they're super effective weapons. He fatigues people really bad by making them constantly back up. But look, the fact of the matter is, he's never really putting his opponent in danger, very often. So why may have one judge given Paulo Costa 4 rounds? Well, they're looking at this fight. Sean's walking him down. He's dodging pretty much every single shot, landing a lot of jabs. But Paulo Costa's strikes, simply the ones he did land, were more devastating. He never landed anything crazy. But, round 1, for example, he landed a lot of hard leg kicks. And he landed maybe 1 or 2 decent shots upstairs. So in the mind of this judge, okay, who put their opponent in more danger? Who got closer to ending this fight? Well, Paulo Costa did. And I'm not necessarily saying this is correct, but this is the judge's mindset while scoring this fight. I think round 3 is a great example. Sean spent the entire round pushing Costa back, landed a lot of good jabs, a lot of good front kicks, but you look specifically at the replays from round 3, and what you see here is Sean is landing his jabs, but his follow-up shots are kind of missing. They're either hitting Costa's glove or Costa slides just out of the way. And Costa landed some hard leg kicks, a couple good shots to the body, and 1 decent shot upstairs. And Dave Torelli clearly must have looked at this and said, okay, well, Costa put Strickland in more danger than Strickland put him in. Costa was the one who got closer to ending this fight. And again, I'm not necessarily saying this is correct. I certainly would not have scored this fight anywhere close to 4-1 Costa, but this is the scoring criteria. This is what the judges are trained to follow, and this logic sort of checks out here. But you look at some other examples. The fight against Dricus Du Plessis. Sean's defense was amazing. Dricus had a miserable time landing shots on him, and Sean landed a lot of jabs. But all it really took for Dricus to win some of those rounds was just landing 1 significant shot. That's all he needed. 1 big shot, and then boom, he officially put Sean in more danger than Sean put him in, so he wins the round. And, unfortunately, whether it's true or not, Sean loses a split decision. Another one, Jared Cannonier. Very, very similar thing. Sean loses a split decision Every single round was close. Sean did a great job landing a lot of jabs, a lot of good teeps. He was overall more effective at landing, but the judging criteria doesn't say the winner is who was more effective at landing. It's who landed the more impactful shots that contributed to the end of the fight. Who put their opponent in more danger? Well, all Jared needed was one big shot per round to, theoretically win every single round. Now, against Israel Adesanya, Sean's style matched up perfectly because Adesanya is going to try to point fight you, and Sean, simply is sort of the better point fighter in that matchup, as weird as it sounds. But against these other guys, unfortunately, Sean's style, what he's good at, it doesn't really work with the judging criteria. I mean, at least not as effectively as you would hope, and honestly, that's a big problem for Sean Strickland. It really is.